Brazil is currently experiencing one of the most critical moments in its recent democratic history. In September 2025, the Federal Supreme Court sentenced former President Jair Bolsonaro to 27 years and 3 months in prison for his participation in an attempted coup d'état following the 2022 elections. This case represents not only the culmination of an institutional crisis that has persisted for years but also exposes the fragilities and contradictions of a deeply corrupt Brazilian political system, in which all the main actors, Bolsonaro, Lula, and the Supreme Court itself, demonstrate a questionable commitment to the nation's true interests. Bolsonaro's conviction, while it may appear to some as a triumph of justice, actually highlights the complete deterioration of the Brazilian political landscape, where the struggle for power has become a war without principles, led by figures who, each in their own way, contributed to the erosion of trust in democratic institutions. Development. The origins of the coup plot. The attempted coup investigated by the Office of the Attorney General began well before the events of the 8th of January 2023. According to investigations, the planning started in 2021, when Bolsonaro began systematically questioning the reliability of the Brazilian electoral system, specifically the electronic voting machines. This movement cannot be analyzed in isolation but should be seen as part of a broader political context marked by extreme polarization and the deterioration of democratic dialogue in the country. The situation intensified after March 2021, when Minister Edson Fachin annulled Lula's convictions related to Operation Car Wash, rendering him eligible once more. This decision, widely considered questionable both legally and in terms of timing, reopened Lula's electoral possibilities, setting the stage for a direct confrontation with Bolsonaro that would prove explosive for Brazilian democracy. The federal police identified that those involved in the alleged coup plot operated in an organized manner, divided by specific tasks. The plan included extremely serious elements, including the possibility of extreme violence, even targeting the elected president and vice president, as well as Supreme Court ministers. Investigations revealed that this plan, according to the prosecution, had the acquiescence of the then President of the Republic. The structure of the criminal organization. According to the Attorney General's indictment, Bolsonaro was the central figure in a criminal organization that intended to keep him in power through a coup, using the presidency of the Republic as its instrument. Among the actions attributed to the former president are the dissemination of false information about the electoral process and systematic attacks on the other branches of government. The organization's core included prominent figures such as General Walter Braga Neto, who was Bolsonaro's running mate in 2022 and, according to investigations, provided his residence for meetings to plan the coup. Also part of the group were former Navy Commander Almir Garnia Santos and various other military and civilian associates close to the former president. The Attorney General's office established direct links between this alleged plot and the events of the 8th of January 2023, when Bolsonaro supporters invaded and vandalized the Three Powers buildings in Brasilia. According to the prosecution, Bolsonaro maintained direct connections to these acts, being the celebrated leader by the demonstrators, who echoed his claims of alleged electoral fraud. The trial and conviction. Bolsonaro's trial at the Supreme Court began in September 2025 before the court's first panel. The final verdict was 4 votes to 1 for conviction, with ministers Alexandra de Moraes, Flavio Dino, Carmen Lucia, and Cristiano Zanin voting to convict all defendants, while Luiz Fux dissented, acquitting most of the accused, including the former president. The sentence imposed on Bolsonaro was 27 years and 3 months in closed prison, one of the harshest in recent Brazilian political history. It is important to note, however, that imprisonment will not be enforced immediately, as appeals against the decision are still possible. Furthermore, Bolsonaro is already ineligible until 2030 due to a previous decision by the Superior Electoral Court, related to other cases. Systemic corruption in the Brazilian political landscape. The Bolsonaro case, severe as it is, cannot be analyzed as an isolated phenomenon but should be understood as a symptom of a deeper illness affecting the entire Brazilian political system. All the main actors in this national tragedy, Bolsonaro, Lula, and the Supreme Court itself, bear responsibility for the institutional degradation the country is experiencing. During his presidency, Jair Bolsonaro demonstrated clear administrative incompetence, promoted systematic social division, and, according to the charges that led to his conviction, undermined democracy. His administration was marked by scandals, nepotism, scientific denialism during the COVID-19 pandemic, and behavior that, regardless of legal considerations, was profoundly damaging to Brazil's image and interests. On the other hand, Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva, who returned to power following the controversial annulment of his convictions, also represents the worst aspects of Brazilian politics. Leader of a party historically involved in systemic corruption schemes such as Mensalão and Operation Car Wash, Lula embodies the perpetuation of clientelist and predatory political practices that drain public resources and hinder national development. The Federal Supreme Court, in turn, has become a partisan political actor, abandoning its constitutional role as an impartial guardian of the Constitution. Its decisions, often controversial and politicized, contribute to the erosion of institutional trust and heighten political tensions. The conduct of some of its ministers, marked by arrogance and overt partisanship, is a disgrace to the Brazilian judiciary. Consequences for Brazilian democracy. Bolsonaro's conviction, while potentially seen as a milestone in the defense of democracy, actually exposes the extreme fragility of Brazilian institutions. The fact that a former president reached the point of being convicted for an attempted coup reveals the depth of the national political crisis. This situation is exacerbated by the complete lack of genuine political leadership in the country. Neither Bolsonaro nor Lula represent serious national projects committed to the common good. Both are expressions of a flawed political system that prioritizes private and partisan interests over national development and public welfare. The Supreme Court, rather than acting as an institutional mediator, has become part of the problem, with decisions that frequently exceed its constitutional powers and contribute to political polarization. Its conduct in various cases demonstrates an unacceptable political bias for a court that should be technical and impartial. The national political future. The Brazilian political scenario post-Bolsonaro conviction remains extremely worrying. The country continues to be held hostage by unprepared, corrupt, and incompetent political leaders who exploit public institutions for their own ends. The Brazilian population, which deserves representatives capable of meeting its needs and aspirations, finds itself without political options genuinely committed to national interest. The extreme polarization between Bolsonaroism and Lulism represents a false dichotomy that prevents the emergence of serious and competent political alternatives. As long as national political debate remains centered on these two equally problematic poles, Brazil will continue to stagnate on fundamental issues such as education, healthcare, public security, infrastructure, and economic development. Conclusion. The Bolsonaro case and his conviction for an attempted coup represent a historic moment that should serve as a warning about the urgent need for political renewal in Brazil. However, reality shows that the country remains trapped in a vicious cycle of poor governance, represented by figures such as Bolsonaro, Lula, and a political class overall unfit for national challenges. Bolsonaro's conviction, however legally sound, does not solve the structural problems of the Brazilian political system. Until a new generation of political leaders genuinely committed to the public interest emerges, Brazil will continue to be governed by figures who, each in their own way, perpetuate mediocrity, corruption, and national division. It is crucial for Brazilian society to understand that both Bolsonaro and Lula, as well as the Supreme Court in its current configuration, are part of the problem, not the solution. All these actors contributed, in different ways, to the deterioration of democratic institutions and the impoverishment of national political debate. Brazil's future depends on its people's ability to reject these false alternatives and seek leadership genuinely committed to building a more just, prosperous, and developed nation. Until then, cases such as Bolsonaro's will continue to be symptoms of a deeper political disease eroding the foundations of Brazilian democracy. History will judge harshly all those who, having had the opportunity to serve the country, chose only to serve themselves and the political groups. Bolsonaro, Lula, and the other representatives of this failed political generation will leave behind a legacy of division, backwardness, and missed opportunities for national development.